much, Ger. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us here at the sports stage of the Web Summit, joined by two faces and two men no doubt you will know very, very well. Former All Blacks player and Munster player Doug Howlett, and current Galway and Portumna hurler Joe Canning.
Cheers.
Guys, the title of this is the franchise player. Maybe in the NFL that means something very different to what I would perceive it to be, which is the players maybe that have more pressure on them, the players of which more is expected, the players that have to be, I guess, the stars in a team. And I know that word maybe sits a bit uncomfortably with players who are those guys, but Doug, we'll start with you. At what point when you were playing rugby did you realise that maybe you stood out a bit from everyone else, that maybe you had a bit more talent, maybe more pressure was going to come on you? Because you made your debut in Super Rugby at the age of 18. So, that's very young for a rugby player or any player.
Yeah, you're right. And I was lucky, I guess. I was probably the marquee player back at school. So as an 18-year-old, I was playing for my school, but also playing professional rugby. So, in some ways I was lucky in that, I made all my mistakes as a marquee player at school, and they were classic. I probably, bought the car. I didn't endear myself to my teammates. I, probably drunk a little too much. All these types of things, which by the time I came into professional sport, were out of my system, and I could be a better role model for the professional environment.
Joe, obviously, as someone who came onto the national stage quite young, you can associate maybe with a lot of what Doug is saying. Maybe it was a bit different for you because in GAA, we think of it anyway as having a different ethos to any other sport around the world, and because it's, it's all about the parish, that if you do stuff like that, people will remind you. They'll let you know when you walk into the shop every Monday morning, or when you're on your way to school. And of course, when you were in school, you were already very well known.
Yeah, I suppose when I started off, I started senior at 15 years of age, so I was a little bit younger, but I wasn't allowed to drink or anything at that stage anyway. No, but it was different. It was a different kind of a pressure, I suppose, from a more professional to an amateur kind of a sport. As you said, going at home, you were meeting everybody that you knew straight away, do you know what I mean? And your family and friends, and everybody was quite quick to peg you back down to normality if you ever got ahead of yourself in a way. So I suppose that's the good thing about the GA. You can't really get ahead of yourself too much.
Yeah. What about the choice you had, Doug? Because you were an excellent sprinter. I mean, you were a record-breaking sprinter. Did you ever think to yourself, I'm going to try this? I mean, how did you make the choice between sprinting and rugby?
Well, it was quite simple, really. It was a team sport versus individual sport. As much as I loved track and field, it was a lonely place. And what I really loved about rugby was the team environment. Winning with your friends, losing with your friends, having somebody to train with, all these great things that build a team. Track and field was wonderful, and I had dreams of being an Olympian, but that's what swung it for me, was the team environment.
And Joe, was it always hurling for you? Because I remember in the early days there was rumours linking you to Munster Rugby. You guys could have been teammates. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have made that or anything. But yeah, when I was back in 2006, I think we won our first Club All Ireland. I was starting college then in Limerick, and Shannon came knocking on the door because I was playing a small bit. But I would have never made it at that. But yeah, I used to play a good bit of rugby when I was younger. But when you got to that kind of age, you had to choose, I suppose, Yeah.
When did you start embracing the pressure, or was it just something that you had to take on board, Doug, because you were talented, you were standout, and no matter how you looked at it, the pressure was there to perform?
Yeah, and I guess you put the pressure on yourself and your close circle of friends and family. They're the ones that put the pressure and want you to do really well. So I guess, I didn't feel the pressure, the external pressure. It was more from within my family and within the team that drove me on to succeed. And as I said, as I came through school into professional rugby, learning off older heads, that's where you learn, and that's where you start to manage these emotions. And like I said, I was 18 years old. You don't know what's going on in your body. There's all sorts of emotions. You want to do this, you want to do that, you want to smash them, you want to run fast, you want to score every try. But it's only through experience that you learn to control all these emotions and turn them into a positive.
Was there any one experience in particular that was a landmark kind of experience for you? Was there a try that you went for that you didn't get and a coach let you know about it? Was there a pass you should have given and didn't and a teammate said it to you? Or was it just a kind of culmination of things?
Yeah, I guess a culmination of things. And as a young fella, I had a good bit of talent, and that got me so far. But once I got into senior rugby, professional rugby, talent only got me so far, and I needed to work harder to keep up with the other athletes. And that was my moment. I said, if I want to do this, I have to work harder than anybody else.
Yeah. Joe, you've talked about pressure, and I suppose when you scored 212 against Cork in the championship, sadly you didn't win that game, but you stood out, got the All-Star that year and the whole lot. You've said recently in an interview with my colleague Ger Gilroy, who's actually the MC here today, that in some ways that was nearly a bad thing, because from that moment on, every time you didn't score 212 for Galway, people were like, hey, what's going on with Joe? He's not delivering on his promise.
Yeah, I said that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but the more I think about it, the more true it is, I suppose. That was one of my first games at senior level with Galway, and when you're not scoring that every day, then people are on your back going, exactly, well, what's the story with him? He's not doing it. And yeah, it becomes increasingly more kind of frustrating then, because people are on your back because you're not doing that. So it's very hard in my own head, I suppose, to meet the expectations that's there every day you go out. And that's, I suppose, the biggest thing when you get further on in your career, and you're not, I suppose, winning All Irelands as we're not doing in Galway at the moment. It's very hard to kind of meet the expectations of the fans and the supporters and people around you.
What about meeting expectations for you, Doug? Because you were in a professional setup very early on, which is different to Joe. So maybe the setup was there to protect you guys and to protect someone like yourself, who was a standout talent.
Who was
when you were playing, you would have been in a professional setup, whereas Joe would have been in an amateur setup when he kind of landed on the scene. Was it different for you because the professional setup kind of legislates for that? It might maybe is able to wrap a blanket a bit more around you than you'll be able to do for an amateur player.
Yeah, it did, and I guess I came through amateur rugby into professional rugby. So, we're a young professional sport as rugby. It took some time, and there were a good few teething issues. But if I look at the environment now and what rugby has for its young athletes in terms of preparation post-rugby, preparation to cope with the stresses of rugby, preparation to cope with media, it's all in front of them, and they have access to coaching, where we sort of learned on the spot as we went. We made our mistakes and we learned from them.
Yeah. Is that the hardest thing, making the mistakes and learning from them? And they're very public mistakes, Joe.
Yeah, it's probably harder because you're more accessible, I suppose, to supporters and the general public in a way. When you're a professional, you're probably protected a little bit from the general public walking down the street or any day you go out. And in the day we live in with social media and stuff like that, you're more in the public eye and you're more open to being scrutinized a lot more if you have a bad day, but then you have to take it. When you have a good day, it's obviously the total opposite. But it's a little bit tough kind of deal with that now,
Yeah. Joe, I appreciate you're still playing, so maybe it's harder for you to answer this than it is for Doug, but Doug, when you landed in Munster, I mean, as a fan, I was thinking, this is such a massive deal, and people were so excited about it. Was it hard to deal with maybe the jealousy that you would have got from other players, or was that a factor in Munster or any other team that you played with before?
When I came to Munster, I came from the All Blacks, one of the best teams in the world, and I came to Munster, and I was going to make it my home. Now, with that, there was huge expectation, and I was nervous, and it was fantastic because it took me back to being that 20-year-old kid, turning up at training, having to prove yourself in front of your peers, having to prove yourself to the supporters, and it was invigorating, and it probably gave me another few years of rugby.
Yeah.
Things were getting a little stale in New Zealand. It was a career I'd had for 10 years doing the same thing. But boy, when I came to Munster and European rugby, it was a real eye-opener. And looking back now, I'm proud to say probably two of my best 5 rugby memories are in the red jersey of Munster.
Yeah. And because you arrived and you were a massive name, still are a massive name, did you have to deal with a bit of envy from other players? Because obviously, when you're a big player like that and you arrive in somewhere like Munster, you're going to benefit from that. Corporates are going to be after you. Sponsorship deals are going to come your way. Extra attention is going to be lavished on you. Was that an issue?
No, it wasn't, not at all. And if I can go back to Joe's comments about the environment in GAA, that's what I came into in Munster. Nobody was bigger than the team. not even the international player coming in. And it was a great environment to come into. Like I said, you had to prove yourself, and everything that you did was earned.
Yeah. Joe, I remember an article a couple of years ago before you played Dublin in the championship, and one of the former players said basically, these lads, they think they're superstars. They're opening Supermax. They're getting these deals, and he just really had a go at the current Galway hurler. And that was a couple of years ago, but I'm sure the same guys will be saying the same things now. How do you handle that as one of the guys who is a standout and who is sought after by corporates and people who want to associate you with brands?
It probably all depends on who's saying it,
yeah.
really. Like you know the guys that are genuine, you know the guys that are kind of trying to sell a few papers and stuff like that. So a lot of the guys, it's very hard, or it's very easy, I suppose, when you're not successful and we're not performing and winning All Irelands with Galway. It's very easy for somebody to kind of down you when you're down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I often see, even this year when we got to the All Ireland, it was if they were waiting in the long grass until we did slip up in the All-Ireland final to write their article and put us down a bit. But it goes in one ear and out the other at times. I'd be more affected on like how my family see it more so than Anton. If like Dad and Mum would obviously read the paper, and I'd be more worried how they see it and how they come across, and from talking to people, and how people would look at my family more so than Anton. To be honest, I wouldn't really care too much. Because I know well that like if we do have a good match, they're not going to say anything good about you anyway. So as everybody says, kind of it's like 6 inches from a clap in the back and a kick up the arse. So you kind of take it with a little bit of pinch of salt, really. But yeah, people have their opinions, and that's the beauty about sport. Everybody and everybody in every social aspect. Yeah. The beauty about it is everybody has an opinion, and you have to respect that as well in a way,
Doug, what do you make of the reaction to GA players or standout guys when their team or they don't perform? Do you think it's a lot different to it would be for rugby? For example, in 2007, when you were beaten by France, we won't blame any individuals, Wayne Barnes. Did you kind of learn what Joe was talking about there, that the reaction can be, there is a thin line, but it's there, and if you don't do what's expected and you don't do what they want, they are just waiting to have that pop?
Yeah, and expectation's huge, in the environment when you're at the top like that. And I remember playing as an All Black in 2005 against Ireland, as a matter of fact. We played in Otago. We beat Ireland, I think it was 14-7. And the All Blacks at home, we got booed off the pitch. Wow. Because they were expecting more of a win. So the expectation was just so high, but you learn to embrace that.
Yeah.
And you learn to turn it into a positive.
Yeah.
And when you're playing with mentally strong players, I put Paul O'Connell, Ronan O'Gara, these types of guys, they're not only fantastic players, firstly, but secondly, they bring the best out in everybody else around them.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful talent to have in a team.
You were already a franchise player at Munster, and I think we've kind of talked about what the definition of that is, or what we perceive it to be. But then in 2012, you took over from Paul O'Connell as the captain, the first foreign signing to captain Munster on a full-time basis. I mean, that was pressure. That was something that really made you a standout guy if you weren't standout before.
Yeah, and when you look at the environment that team was in, we were in a small transition. There was some players moving on, and there were a group of players coming in. So I guess, I was an old head, if you could put it that way. Yeah. I'd worked with a lot of the young players coming through. I had the respect of this group. And they listened, and they were learning from what we were teaching. So, like I said with Paul, one of the strengths, or something I try to bring out in our young players, is to be yourselves. Express yourself for what you are and what got you in the room. And that's something that I've learned from in my past.
Is there a danger in the franchise player being the captain as well? Because there's already an awful lot of pressure on you, Joe, when you are someone who has a lot expected of them.
In a way, it could be. It all depends on the culture and environment that you have in the setup. Like, it all depends, I suppose, who's with you, and if guys not so much kind of jealous, but perceive you to be kind of in the limelight the whole time and wondering why they aren't. Do you know what I mean? But it's very hard to kind of. It's how you react yourself and how you create that environment as a captain. If you were that way, and get guys to buy into it with you, it's totally up to how you are and the culture that's actually in the camp more so than anything.
If I just tag on to the back of that, that was one of the great things about being in a team environment as opposed to athletics.
Yeah.
Because as captain, you're never out there on your own. You know, there's always different individuals that might lead the scrum, that might lead the line out, that might lead defence, that are all leaders within the group, and all I'm doing is just feeding and getting information from this group of people.
Have you ever felt like you were out there on your own? Maybe before you got to Munster?
There are a couple of times when I've dropped a high ball and, in front of 60,000 people, and you're out there on your own when, you'd wish the earth would swallow you up. But again, being part of a team, someone comes along, gives you a slap on the back, hey, next job. And that's a wonderful feeling.
What about being the leader in the dressing room? And just to read a quote from yourself, Doug, from a couple of years ago, you say there's a time and a place for everything. This is in regards to guys making noise and knocking down doors and whatever in the dressing room. You said, but you can't do that shouting and punching walls every game. Just like anything you do, if you do it too often, it loses its shine. There may be a time once or twice in the tournament where that's called for, but consistency is key in this tournament regarding the World Cup. And what you need to do is replicate that performance or that close to perfect performance time and time again. That's how you win. That's a quote from yourself about how you prepare yourself. Is that very important to you that you
Yeah, it is. And, that was probably a major difference I saw coming from New Zealand to Ireland, was that, the Munster team that I came into, they could be world beaters one day.
Yeah.
And the following day, they could lose to, a lower level team.
And when they beat a team ranked above them, would they be doing all that shouting and screaming in the
they
dressing
certainly
room?
would. There's an emotional level, there's emotional rise, there's an emotional arousal within the group that, you're not going to lose that game. But my question is, why can't you do it? You can't do that every game. You've got to be a little more steady with spikes of enthusiasm.
Yeah. Joe, is it difficult to kind of get people to follow your lead, to come with you as the franchise players? Doug was saying there, to raise it for every game. I mean, Galway over the years would have had inconsistencies. This year was different because, you had a good run.
Yeah, I suppose action speaks louder than words. Do you know what I mean? When you're one of the main players, you can do all the talking you want, but if you're not actually performing on the field, they're not going to follow you. So you have to actually perform every day you go out, or else you won't get the guys coming with you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Or at the very least try. I mean, you said it yourself again, referring to that interview with Ger, that even the days where you were hitting wide, you were still calling the ball on yourself. You were still taking the shots. You gave the pass to Shane Maloney for that winning score in the semi-final.
Well, you always have to. You always have to, or else you're no good to the team. And as Doug said, that's the beauty about team sport. You have other guys with you to back you up if things aren't going your way. Whereas if you were just one guy on your own, you don't have anybody else to come behind you and give you a tap in the back and say, come on, next ball, or anything like that. So that's the beauty about team sport and being part of that. And it's about that consistency of performing and not having the massive spike and the low. It's about having that, as Doug said, level and then a small spike every now and again to perform.
Yeah. Is there anyone that you look at the moment and you think to yourself, Doug, that is a franchise player, be it in Munster or any other sport that you follow?
Well, I guess, topical at the moment with the World Cup having just been played and the All Blacks winning. You look at a character like Dan Carter in the All Blacks, just voted world's best player. All the skills, but again, one of these guys that brings the best out in those around him, and a great guy to boot.
Yeah, Joe?
Yeah, just at the World Cup, obviously Dan Carter and these guys, but even at home, the Paul O'Connells, you can't look much further past guys at home like that,
Okay. Doug and Joel, thank you very much for coming to the Web Summit. I hope you have enjoyed the day so far, and I hope you have a walk around. Ladies and gentlemen, of Galway, Joe Canning, and of the All Blacks, and more importantly, Munster, Doug Howlett.
Thank you.
Well done, boys.